I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Monday, September 19th, 2022. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. I hope you had a great, wonderful weekend, a peaceful weekend. Today, we celebrate being in community in neighborhoods. We call this governance at the neighborhood level. What's the idea? The idea is to connect people in neighborhood businesses and organizations and in community groups, neighbors and friends, people that work with us and for us, people that we work for, right? To demonstrate and benefit from being with each other. And we call that governance. Governance is how we are to each other and for each other. And that's what we do today. I want to, as always, begin by acknowledging my writing partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray. I tell people that Brenda and I were in kindergarten together when we were 5 years old. So we're both 75 now. It's been a long run and a good run. It's good to be working with you, Brenda. How you doing?
How are you?
I'm well. So here we go again. Let's keep it going.
Here we go again and loving it.
Yeah, and loving it. Absolutely. Well, today we've got a great program, but let's also acknowledge our partners in the community, particularly Dianne and the chairperson of Hawthorne Neighborhood Association, our friend D. Phillipps. Dianne, D, how are you guys doing?
Fine, thank you.
Great. How was your weekend? Something was going on before the program, but Dianne, tell me what's going on. How you doing? And you're muted.
Let me just say that I'm going to keep this little silent joke between me and my friend, Miss Brenda, because I might have one of those moments.
All right, well.
But anyway, happy Monday, Al. Hi, B again.
I love you too, Dianne Hawkins. I love it.
But
way to start the week instead of something sad, laughter.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's sad enough that we got to celebrate the Queen and watch that, you know. So, and it's sad that we had all those shootings, but happy Monday, everybody. We're here.
There we go. Well, I'm hoping that in the course of today's program, we're going to hear from some people that we've written about in the newspaper. This Monday's paper, the cover story is a photograph of the a dance troupe from Ethiopia. They're playing at Children's Theater over in South Minneapolis. We might have a couple of the artists from there on the program. That'll be great. And we're also expecting to hear from 4th District Commissioner, and that'll be cool. She's Angela Conley. So we'll look for her. But let's begin. I want to begin with another person that I call both a friend and I have just great admiration and respect for. Her name is Lensa Terfa. And she might not like this, but I'm going to call her a healer because her attitude and her energy, her knowledge and her assignment, her work is to protect the people and particularly to provide health information direction for immigrant populations. I know her because she managed the contract between McFarlane Media and our work to bring information about the COVID-19, both awareness and prevention. And she's been ensuring that we got information and we got the opportunity to do the work for the state. So for that, I'm personally thankful and grateful. But I wanted to also share with our viewers and listeners here and around the world her story and the passion she brings to this work. Lensa Terfa, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, the work is so critical. I'm going to ask you to sort of talk about what is the mandate? Why is it important that, first of all, we as a community jumped into being aware and protecting ourselves and our families in the COVID pandemic, and also to talk about the fact that we're not out of it yet, and we still have to pay attention. So describe the impact of this and why it's so important for ordinary people, our people in particular, to be aware.
Yeah, definitely. As we all know that COVID kind of amplified the health inequity that has have been taking place in our state, and that is where our work came out, or where we are able to reach out to communities that have not been reached out because of COVID. And obviously, COVID kind of hit hard our community. The Black and the BIPOC community have been hit hard by COVID. Because of that, we were able to reach out to the communities that in the past have not been reached for whatever reason, or and obviously we know that there's lots of mistrust when it comes to the government, with whether it is the immigration issue, or it is because of being Black and here at this time, there is that mistrust. So having us being in the MDH and working with the community has been really impactful, and it is something that I am grateful for, and proud to be here, to be honest.
Well, so Lensa, this is so important for this conversation in particular, but in general, the work, because I remember early on, I was at a meeting over in Northeast Minneapolis. It was like maybe META, some business organization, just people that I know. And COVID was just now becoming, a concern, just rising on the radar nationally. And I remember one of the brothers there, kind of jokingly, but this is kind of average for our people, saying, "Oh, you know what? We Black, we don't get COVID," right? Wrong, right? But that's how we kind of joked about COVID at the front end of it. Unfortunately, people that didn't pivot and take it seriously did so at their own risk, at great risk to our community, and the numbers reflected that. And so, number one, because of our experiences, we have this double attitude about the officials, as you said. We think we've been played a little bit, or not been responded to appropriately, consistently. And so therefore there's a hesitation sometimes. And I think that what you've done is work with people like Inside News and McFarlane Media to change that, and to get our people to be more aware, more responsive. What have you found? How has the attitude changed in immigrant and Black BIPOC communities since the pandemic began?
What have been changed since the pandemic is that rebuilding trust. That is the main focus. That for us, it is building trust, because if we don't build that trust, if we don't have that trust, there's no way we will be communicating. It would be just a one-way conversation, and that is not a conversation if it's just one way. So for us, as whether it is the Center for Health Equity, within that we have the community liaisons team, that is the African immigrant and then the African American, and for each community we have those the people from the community, like having me as an African immigrant community liaison. I know what the community needs. I know what are the gaps in my community, and as a Black person, I know what it is needed for the Black person. So having the people from the community and serving to bridge and blocking that gap, it is very crucial. And I think for us, and it is just knowing what it is in our community and listening, and being able to listen, and then amplifying that work, what the community organization, that the little small community organization and the grassroots organizations are doing, and amplifying their work and connecting them with other bigger organizations. So the work is not just there within that community, so it can be amplified.
How do you come to this work? What's your background, Lensa?
Yeah, I actually came to MDH with COVID because initially we know that COVID hit hard at the Black community, and the immigrant community was hit hard in the southern part of Minnesota, the GB's company, and then they needed interpreters because I do have as a side work I do medical interpreting, so I was called as a contract to do an interview for as a case investigator for the Ethiopian communities that speak Amharic and Oromo language, and I happen to speak both language, so I did case investigation for those where it was kind of very difficult for them to. Sometimes it is like we are the ones who to tell them that they tasted positive because that is language barrier. And most of them they did not have enough translated documents to know what it is, even like what it means to taste positive. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do I have COVID? That little thing. So we're able to do that, and then eventually I joined the African Community Liaison team after kind of doing parallel case investigation, and I became a lead case investigator and also part of the community liaison team. Within that African community liaison, we've done so much work with the community organizations that are serving the African community, whether it is in the greater Minnesota or in here in Twin Cities, that is connecting them with local public health or with the leadership and just amplifying the job they're doing. We're able to connect with I'm sure it's 40 plus organizations that we've reached out to, and we're able to some of them help them to they end up working with MDH and as a contractor or just getting resources from us. That was something that we've done as community liaison work, and gradually I moved to doing contract work where I end up doing managing a contract work for different organizations that are serving different communities, that African American, African immigrant, and American Indian communities. So I'm very grateful and very humbled, to be doing this. It is something that is close to my heart, as someone that is an immigrant and didn't think that I would be here and would be able to do this work. And so I'm very grateful for the work I was able to do and continue to do.
Well, let me speak on behalf of both a contractor and a community elder. We're grateful for you, for the integrity and the intensity and the clarity that you bring to the work. And we're glad that our state, that Minnesota, has recognized the value of bringing our people into positions of responsibility, because we give each other a level of trust that the society in general has not earned, and but we trust our people. And so I'm glad that you're there, and I want to commend the state for having the good sense to engage your talent, your genius, and your passion in the service of the community. Well, so are you from Ethiopia?
Yes, I was born and grew up in Ethiopia. I actually moved here when I was in my teenage years. I was able to do some high school credits here, and also, I had some high school credits back home, but I was able to finish high school here.
Cool. Well, let me have you help me introduce my next guest, Bibi Tesfamariam and Bichu Shimellis are with Circus Abyssinia. Let's bring them on. Good afternoon.
Hi, guys.
Good to see you both. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you guys?
We're well. We just are pleased that you're here. Take a minute and tell us about Circus Abyssinia. You are performing right now at the Children's Theater, but talk about the organization and the work that you do. And meet Lensa. That's your person, I think.
Yeah, we are Circus Abyssinia. It was formed in 2016. We've been performing since then until COVID hit and everything. So, as you know, And we've been performing since we were very kid. We grew up in Ethiopia, and then we moved here as previous guest said, as teenagers, and very young, not speaking English in England, obviously not here. So we've been performing with different companies, traveling, and we joined a traveling circus because that was our dream. So we can just soak up the experience. So we had a dream to own our own circus at some point. So we joined a circus, and then we fell in love with the traveling circus, and then we performed with the same circus for 10 years. Same circus. Usually you travel, you move to one circus, you do 2 years, 3 years, but we loved it so much. So I think that was an advantage for us, so we can soak up all the experience. And then in 2015, we decided to have our own company. So ever since we've been touring, performing all over the world.
Let's show the video we have of your organization, and we'll talk more in just a second. Amazing, amazing. And Voss, you might be able to pull up the current cover of Insight News on issue.com. We can share that as well. So, guys, tell us what we just saw and talk more about the organization, about the artwork, the art that you do.
So this is our second production called Tulu. This is our second one. The first one's called Ethiopian Dreams. So Tulu is all about the first Black African woman to win the Olympic medal in 1992 in Barcelona. So we're pretty much celebrating her life. So it's back in Ethiopia most of the time. It's literally you've been known, you've been a legend, but you go back to the background and nobody remembers you, nobody knows to talk about you. But we decided to make this in 2018, just before we start writing and we start putting together everything. So Tulu is a celebration, pretty much. Preaching peace, unity. She always about that. Whenever you see her interview and her personal life as well, on her personal life, and she's done a lot for Ethiopian athleticism, let alone in around Africa as well. So this show is about Tulu and a celebration of
women in general.
Women in general.
Let me ask Lensa any questions. Have you put on a different hat, Lensa? You're my guest and my friend. Any questions or comments that you might want to ask our brothers from Ethiopia?
No, that is beautiful. I'm very glad that you guys are able to amplify that story. That is very crucial, and very happy to see that. And kudos to you guys for doing this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lensa. So what's the impact? How do you gauge how your show and your story is touching the lives of children and of audiences? When you're watching the show being presented, when you're presenting it, and you're looking at the audience reaction, how do you describe that? What are you discovering? What's happening?
Especially in Minneapolis, the public more responsive, because in England, mostly, even though they enjoy the show, they don't like show how much they enjoy the show. Here it's completely different, and even the kids, as soon as you jump on the stage, the public is with you, and then that eye contact that we used to, because when we work in a circus, in a small circus, that's always there. And in theater, sometimes you can't really see the audience. That's a little bit difficult, but at the same time, you get that reaction, and then it feels great. So for us to be able to express this on a stage, if you come and see the show, you would know how much we enjoy the show, and then how much we respond to the audience. So that's like having extra support at the background, as always.
Do you know when you're on a particular show or when you're not on, when you're off? Do you have a feeling for how the show is going every time you perform? It's question number one. Question number two is there a place in the middle of the performance where it becomes more than just a performance, but really an experience, and an experience that's so big and encompassing that it changes people's lives? What do you think?
I think, yeah, definitely, especially on the first question, every show is different and every audience is different. And you completely, there's sometimes you come out from the show and essentially, have I not done enough for the audience to understand it? That question is always going to come to your mind. But we try our best to interpret whatever act we're doing, with whatever tricks we're doing, we're trying to interpret it with a storyline. And for the second question, it comes to the second question, is especially in this production with Tulu, I would say it's not just one. There's a couple of moments you actually audience can just feel, and it changed. We do believe it changed their life story, and then they can understand how much Tulu wants to be success and to be an icon, to be a legend, to be able to. I mean, for us as a kid, we remember in 1992, that was the first, we are actually allowed to stay late when she was running in Barcelona. And that actually changed our life. We say it changed our life when she ran and when she won that gold medal. We were so inspired. And the next morning, we went out running early in the morning. So we wanted to be Tulu. So we believe this on the show, there's moments actually interpret for the audience. Yes, there is things that can spot and that can actually inspire.
Here's the last question for you guys. I read a lot and study a lot and think a lot about what I am describing as an African way of knowing. And the concept is that in our culture, in the culture of Africa, of African people, there is knowledge that is ancient, wisdom that is the source of all wisdom. And too often in the modern era, we have been disconnected from the truth of our history and antiquity, and from the truth of our centrality, the fact that we are at the center and the source of creation and existence. So I ask you, as Africans and as Ethiopians and as artists, I ask you as human beings, how does the sense and the weight of history of the ancestors inform what you do in your craft? If it does, maybe I'm dreaming, but that's how I'm looking at the world. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, we always wanted to represent our culture, and even though at the background when we started, there was always doubt, because when you think about circus, you don't think about Africa, you don't think about Ethiopia, let alone Ethiopia, and it was difficult to begin with. So how are you going to convince the Westerns to come and see an Ethiopian circus? They expect you to go on the stage and do traditional dance, even though it's beautiful, that kind of thing they expect. And they come see the show, they'll be like, oh my God, this is incredible. I didn't expect that. That kind of thing happened. It's always placing in mind. So you trying to, you feel like you want to do extra amount of effort to do little things. But now, because we've been living in England for quite some time, that kind of thinking is a little bit fading away, which is a good thing. That's it. So now we're confident enough to do whatever we want. It's our company. We can do whatever we want, because we've toured around. We've met a lot of people. We have good friends, like in the circus community. So that kind of feedback that we get from everybody gives us that confidence. But as you say, it's difficult to convince people to come and see an all Ethiopian circus. And our acts, as I say that all the time, we have to prioritize the act, because people come and see the show in Western for the culture, but at the same time we want to surprise them with the act, so the act comes first.
Right. Vaj, put the cover of Inside Up. Just show that real quickly. I just want to commend you guys with the beauty of what you do. And as we're speaking, in my own head, the top picture reminds me almost of written language. I mean, the form is like writing. And so what you are doing, from my point of view, in movement, is communicating the same as one communicates with writing, with script,
Exactly.
and everything else. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, listen, guys, thank you so very much. People, go over to Children's Theater over in South Minneapolis. Check out the play. Check out this work. Tulu.
Tulu. Her full name is Doratu Tulu.
All right. And enjoy it. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm going to continue with the program. And our guests are welcome to hang out as long as they wish, you know. But I want to bring in Dianne Haulcy right now. And Dianne, you know, this is all perfect. Everything flows because Dianne is also working with children and families. And I think that one of the audiences that you are working with over at Circus Abyssinia is children. That's, you know, the fertile ground for creating futures. And it's an awesome responsibility, an awesome task. Well, Dianne is the CEO of the Family Partnership. It's in the neighborhood here in North Minneapolis, but it's a big organization developing an agenda for creating opportunity for families and children, I think from infant to kindergarten. Dianne, how are you? Good to see you. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Al. I'm doing great. It's great to be here. And I just want to say thank you for that lovely introduction. I have been listening to you, reading you probably for the better part of my life. And I just want to thank you for being such a mainstay in our community and for bringing such interesting topics of all that's coming from our community. So I'm real honored to be here.
Thank you for saying that, but you are hitting the nail on the head when you say there's so much in our community. We are doing so much, you know, right here in Minneapolis, right here on the north side, but just like North Minneapolis, we're also doing a lot in North Accra, a lot in North Havana, you know, a lot in North London.
Yes.
Our people are doing a lot all over the planet.
All over.
And Diana, if we don't tell our stories, they won't be told. So
Yeah.
I thank you for making the story. You're writing the future and shaping the lives and spirit and soul and expectations of these children, babies, you know. So thank you. So take a minute and give us the introduction to the organization, the mission and vision.
Yes, very happy to. So the Family Partnership is actually an organization that's been around for over 140 years. Started in the settlement house movement and have had many iterations over the year. Right now, we are focusing our efforts on helping to make families whole. So we have a variety of services that really do that, starting with, as you mentioned, therapeutic early childhood services. We have a center-based program in North Minneapolis. We also have one in South Minneapolis on Lake Street as well. And we also do a number of home visiting programs to families. We offer behavioral health programming, outpatient at both of our locations in North and South Minneapolis. And we also do some work, what we call anti-sex trafficking work on Lake Street. That's been around for many years. And that work we offer both to youth and adults. And we look at all of this work that we do as trying to strengthen families. We're trying to strengthen children and families. And we're doing it in such a way, quite frankly, where we want to also close opportunity gaps, close achievement gaps that are happening between BIPOC children and white children. And so we're looking at different ways that we can do that in all of our work.
So unpack that. How do you interact with young children, with the youngest? What does the organization do to support those children and their families?
Yes. So in our center-based programming, we call it therapeutic because our programming is, we offer so many different things. Oftentimes in our community, some of our children, our families may have high mobility, or they may have dealt with survival situations that have left our young children not ready for kindergarten. And many times, this is one of the reasons why I love early childhood, though. Many times, a lot of the times, with just a little extra work, you can catch children up. And so we offer things like occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, play therapy. And we do it right on site. So if you're in our program, we have some beautiful rooms for all of these services, and your child can receive them as a part of being, a part of our program. In addition, we are trying to launch a curriculum that we have developed in coordination with a woman named Chris Wing on executive functioning. Now, executive functioning is kind of a big word, but really what it means is that there are those skills that we have, everybody has, that really make us ready to learn. And so those skills are things like knowing how to sit and listen, knowing how to plan, knowing how to, take in information and then remember it and then act upon it. So all of those things are what we call executive functioning. Oftentimes when children experience trauma, the thing that gets disrupted is those executive functioning skills. So we are developing curriculum specifically on how to help children, and it's being normed for children of color specifically on how to catch them up in these areas. And our curriculum actually is not just for the child, it's for the parent as well. Because oftentimes, if you are experiencing trauma, executive functioning can be either stunted or, interrupted for adults as well. And so this curriculum helps both parents and children in this area.
How about, so that leads me to the question about mental health in our community. Has our attitude about, what is a healthy mind matured about mental health? I think if you say it like that, what's a healthy mind, people have no argument with it. But if you say mental health, there is sometimes a stigma. And I think that we end up disadvantaging ourselves because we have these perceptions that are based on something, in history or in trauma. But at this point in time, they may be impeding our ongoing movement towards healing. So let me ask you, Dianne, to talk about the question of how do we, number one, recognize barriers to healing in children and in families, and how do we set on movement towards broader, more comprehensive healing for individuals, families, and community?
That is such a good question, Al. And I think I want to start by saying, I think that there has not only been stigma about mental health in our communities, but let's be honest, I think historically there have been people that may have sought out help and not really gotten the help they needed because it wasn't culturally competent help. And so we have had maybe some poor experiences in these areas as well, which then of course just, leads to the stigma, just reinforces the stigma about it. But I do believe things are changing. There are many more, compared to like when I was growing up, for instance, there are many more therapists of color, African-American therapists, and many therapists now that are African-American that are really, you talked earlier about, really digging deep into our African culture. There are therapists that do that really look to our African culture to kind of bring those parts in to help people heal. And so I think, now things have changed. And what I would say is that people often, I think we've gotten to the point where we recognize everyone should have a doctor, like a physician that they go to on a regular basis. You go to your annual physical, every year to kind of see how your body is doing. Well, you should have a therapist that is, that is regularly someone that you are developing a relationship with, that you are dealing with your emotional issues with. It's no different. And in terms of the stigma, there should be no, stigma against that. It's no different than going to see a doctor. I truly recommend that, everyone have some kind of therapist that they see, and a therapist that really understands them and understands their culture.
Well, that gives me the chance to do what I always do, Dianne. I talk about my therapist. I go to therapy every week with a mental health therapist, and I am proud to talk about that because I think we need to talk about it. Number one, and I say I'm a 75-year-old Black man, and having a therapist to connect with and talk to every week is the only problem with that is I wish I had the therapist 30, 40, 50 years ago, but I'm glad I have the therapy now. And the reason I bring it up is I want to tell other Black men in particular, and Black people in general, don't be scared. Don't be afraid. In fact, you earned and you deserve health, and you deserve to be healed. Yes. And you deserve to discover the healer within you. But it doesn't drop out of the sky, it's work. And therapists enable you to uncover those capabilities for compassion and caring and being a better human being, being the human being you want to be. So I encourage our people to do that. And I also say, because we're African people, Black people, it makes sense to do business with Black people. To find a therapist in our community and, see that person as a person whose business you're helping to grow. And the exchange is that they're helping you, the customer, be your best self and be what you want to be in community. So I throw that in to both affirm and testify that this conversation about mental health is so critical and so important. And thank you for doing that. What do we need to get more people in our community in the profession and more of us utilizing the talent that we have? I would love to see 5,000 therapists in North Minneapolis so that every block had a therapist that handled 20 or 30 people on his or her block. They were available to them, but therapy and healing would elevate to be one of the characteristics of our community and of our being with each other. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Oh, first of all, I just want to commend you. I'm so glad you said what you did about having your therapist. That is one of the things that's what we need to do to get people to be more comfortable with it. We need to tell our stories. And so you talking about the fact that, yes, I have a therapist and I see this therapist, weekly, quite frankly, if I may, being African-American, being Black in America, if there is any group of people that need therapy,
you're right.
Because of what we have experienced, because of all the trauma, that the racism and all of that, all of that leads to us, needing and being able to utilize therapy. And I also do a little plug for African-American therapists. If you are out there, we would love to have you join at the Family Partnership as well. We have, like I said, we do have therapy at both locations, and we are always looking for talented African-American therapists to join our team. So I'll just put that little plug in there as well.
And I hope this conversation might encourage somebody who's in high school now or grade school or in college to look at therapy as a career and say, you know what?
Yes.
I'm a feeling person and I have a desire to help people be their best, maybe that's a career for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I will also say to your point about our community, there are ways, being able to help people and being able to dig into what is happening in our mind, that is not divorced from our African roots. We may call it something different, but and so I think that has something to do with part of the stigma. We've made it kind of a clinical thing, but that is part of our history. You can go back and look, at the African culture, and there it's clearly, we may call them aunties, or we may call them, something else, but there have always been people in our communities that have been able to help and walk people through their issues and their situations.
How do you see us advancing this idea that that our legislature, for example, ought to invest more in organizations like the Family Partnership to enable you to be of greater service? Organizations like the Northside Achievement Zone, the Urban League, the African American Child Wellness Institute, organizations that deal with mental health. How do we elevate this in a way that we attract the resources we need to be the best for our people? What do you think?
Well, there's a saying, I'm sure you know, that those people that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
Good one.
And so I truly believe in that. We need to be able to invest in community solutions for these issues. And the way that our government currently gives money is that they usually decide what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they will even tell you the outcome that they are looking for. And then they will say, if you can do this, then we'll give you the money to do that.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to going to the community and saying, tell us what your issues are. And also tell us how you would recommend the healing part. What is the solution for this? You're the one living in the community, experiencing these issues. So you're the expert in this.
Mm-hmm.
You just may not have the money to do it, but you're the expert in knowing what should be done.
Mm-hmm.
I am completely in support of that kind of leadership from our legislature.
Brenda, any questions or comments? Dee, Diana, everybody join in. Lensa, thank you for still being here, but this is an open conversation, and any thoughts or questions or ideas?
I'd like to ask Dianne. Dianne is a retired educator. I'm seeing a different layer for educators now. How are teachers expected, or what would you suggest, either through the counseling, administration, or whatever, that we identify children that are really, really suffering with everything that has been going on and what they have gone through over the past 2 years, and then try to balance their academics, knowing that our BIPOC, our Black American students, are so far behind. And so there's so many levels that they have to deal with. How would you suggest that educators deal with this very critical issue?
Mm-hmm.
Brenda, before Diane answers, would you talk about the conversation you and I had with Tyrone Terrell a week or so ago, and he talked about children in trauma bringing trauma to the classroom, and it was gripping. Maybe you would share that and have Diane respond to that as well.
There was a young man, third grade, and he came to school, and I don't know if it was a principal or a teacher that addressed him for being out in the hall or something, and he said, you know, I can go home and get it. Well, immediately she knew what get it meant. And then to come to find out that the young man had purchased a gun, and he informed that it was very easy to do that. You know, you could get one for $25 or more. Uh, and then the fact that his mother was on a drug, I don't know which one it was, and there was a man in the house, and he went into his young sister, 7 years old, into her room. And so he told this educator, he said, if he had touched my sister, I was going to shoot him. Now, I don't think this young man, third grade, would be interested in why George Washington went across the Delaware when he's trying to figure out why he is or what is going to happen when he gets home. But that mindset for a young man, third grade.
Hmm.
And, you know, having been in the classroom for and as an administrator for 4 decades, I couldn't even fathom. And then the mother had the audacity to say, "Oh, he went into the wrong room." So
Yeah.
it was like Al and I were listening, and we were saying, "Huh?"
Well, first of all, thank you, Brenda, for bringing that up. These are the questions that we need to be answering right now, and display the urgency of the situation that our children are in. One of my other hats I wear is that I'm chair of the board of the Northside Achievement Zone, and have been involved in some way with them since their inception. And so those kind of issues that you're talking about, unfortunately, are not that uncommon, and have only gotten worse during the pandemic, because a lot of our children have been lost to during the pandemic, lost in the shuffle of everything, with the distance learning and all of that. And what I would say to that is that there are some urgent needs like that that need to be addressed. And I happen to know that because of the pandemic, those entities that you might think are thinking about this are not really thinking about that. They've been so inundated with trying to figure out the pandemic, the distance learning, not the distance learning, how to operate, that these kinds of questions have just fallen by the wayside, because they just haven't had the capacity to deal with it. And what I say is that, our children can't wait. They can't wait for a whole nother, it's almost like a whole nother generation, to go by. And these solutions, we have to be creative about it. People have to see that those things are happening, in that child's life. And to be honest, there, as Al brought up legislation earlier. There's some legislation. We have to be courageous. There's some legislation we need to do. Why on earth does this child know how to purchase a gun for $25?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody seems to want to answer that question right now. But, the fact that he knows more about how to purchase a gun than maybe, what's happening in his classroom is a huge issue. And it's an issue that at least in some way, legislation could address. It just hasn't. And so I think that there's definitely a public policy issue here that we're dealing with, especially when it comes to our public schools, especially when it comes to violence and gun violence. There's some public policy issues involved. that we need to be that not only do we not to, that we need to be aware of, but we need to be advocating for. We need to be
Yeah,
thinking
that's it.
about that boy. You know, when we are going to the polls in November, we need to think about that child and what is the best legislation for that child and for children like that.
And we need to voice the fact that there is a surplus there sitting in St. Paul that could help
Yes,
our
yes.
educators, help our children. Dianne, I just want to mention real quick is Kevin Love with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I've introduced it to Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya with the African American Child Wellness Institute, and to Al. In 2019, Kevin Love just lost it, but it had been going on for a long time. And so finally, when he was able to get with a therapist and began to get into the root of his problems, he started this program called the Love Fund. And it is on mental health, and there are 14 lessons. I've looked at them, and they're powerful. And we need to seize upon programs like that and look at grants.
Yes.
You know, where there is funding available through some of the largest philanthropic, you know, organizations that could help us, because I would bet that there are plenty other children like this third grader. And so not only do we need to help them and our children, but we have educators just filing out of schools around the country because they can't handle all the layers. And I just looked at, you know, their pay, and, you know, it's like they have to take care of their families, and then their jobs become even more difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not good.
Let me complicate this a little more. You know, so we know that this trauma that's generational, that comes out of our experience as formerly enslaved human beings, is ever present, something that we have to both address and work through. But at the same time, and I'm sort of throwing this towards Lensa, it's not your area, but I'm addressing you as a sister who is immigrant and aware of the challenges that immigrant families have. I remember having employed sisters that were in Liberia that had stories about soldiers coming in and shooting up their family members, and now they're here. And I just remember this one time, a sister was working for me, and something was wrong with her driver's license, and a cop pulled up and stopped her. I've never seen somebody so terrified at having to interact with the police. And the police person, you know, obviously was just trying to check on a tail light, you know, so he's approaching it from my job, tail light. She's approaching it from the horror of her traumatic experience. That's one thing. So all the Liberian children and families, and what about the Latino children and families that have walked and struggled to get away from trauma in their homelands in the Caribbean and in South America? What about our people from East Africa? I interviewed General Riek Machar, who led the war against Khartoum in South Sudan. And he said he and his colleague John Garang left the university at Khartoum and went into the bush and waged a 20-year war against Khartoum. And it was a war that cost 5 million lives. He talked about one of the casualties or tragedies of that war was that they recruited child soldiers. And at the end of the war, how do they reintegrate these children who were 8 years old and 9 and 10 and carrying Kalashnikov, you know, and AR-15s? How do you get them to be children again? And so immigrant children and families also, while on the one hand seeking opportunity, many, not everybody, but many have trauma that they are escaping, but it never leaves. And you have to add that to our experience as Africans and the historic trauma of 400 years of bondage. Lensa, it's enough to make you depressed, but somehow our people have resilience and we rise above it and we still press forward. But what do you think about how do we serve all of our community, immigrant and those that are generations in the population?
Yeah, thank you so much for this point, Dianne. I think I was connected with you as you were saying that it has to be from people with the community, from the community that understands the pain, have been gone through it themselves, and they're the ones who would know the solution because they are close to the problem. They know what it hurts. They know what it can heal. So it is the solution for that is working with the people who are close to it, close to the source of the problem, who has experienced it, who understand it. So it is for the leadership, whether that is, whoever is the upper level, the government has to work with the community organizations that are, working with the community that are hurt, that are, feeling that pain, that went through it, whether it is, historical trauma that are, as an immigrant that we went through, or it is, the historical trauma that our, African-American sisters and brothers have experienced it from their, the generation that they went through. So it is that connection, making that connection and that building that trust, because that we have to have those trusted messengers to be able to reach out to the source of it, and then having those trusted messengers that are from the community and then being able to work with the community is where the solution would be.
Diana, any comments? We're down to the last couple of minutes here. I want to kind of wrap this up, but what are your thoughts, impressions, feelings? And I'm going to end it with Dianne Haulcy giving some instruction to the community to support our work. But Diana and Dee, what are your thoughts?
You have anything, Dee, you want to add? You're muted. She's still muted. You're still muted.
I was just thinking, since Hawthorne has a focus on health and well-being, what can we do to get information into the community, to let people know help is available? You've got, we can find someone for you to talk to. How do you recognize trauma if it's happening to you? Sometimes you don't even know because you're growing up in it. It's around you and you don't recognize it. So how can we use our health and well-being position, our platform, to get information out into the community?
It's a great comment.
Diana, comment, and then.
And I want to say, Diane, it's good seeing you again. And very good topic. Lenisa says, thank you for being here. This is a good conversation because, like you said, Dee, if we do not know the traumas there, and many of our youth right now are experiencing it really bad, how do we help them? So some kind of way, just like you said, Al, you need somebody to talk to. You need someone that look like me, talk to me. Let me talk to you. Let me tell you what's going on. Because trauma is deep and depression follows the trauma.
So Don, the final words are yours. Got about a minute and a half. Summarize, reflect, invite people to support, and give us instruction. What do you think?
Yeah.
And Diane, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your work.
It's been a pleasure being on here, and everything that everyone is saying, I'm really resonating with. To kind of get to Dee's question, being trauma informed is really important. There's lots of trainings right now. That's the good part out there to be trauma informed. I'm proud to say that the Family Partnership, we consider ourselves to be trauma informed and trauma sensitive in all of our programming. And what I would say is, if you want more information about the Family Partnership, please visit our website, thefamilypartnership.org. We do have slots. We do have space at both locations. in both North and South Minneapolis in our preschool. So if you are looking for care, please look us up. We have spots in both locations in our therapeutic preschools. And lastly, I would just say it is a pleasure to be on this show. And it's an honor to be with you, Al, and the rest of your colleagues and guests today. And just, having a conversation with you. So thank you. Thank you for the conversation.
Well, thank you too. And thanks to all of my guests. Great program. Lensa, thank you. Dee, Diana, Brenda. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow, special show. We're doing a town hall with the Stair Step Foundation and Minnesota Department of Transportation, talking about the development, the changes being proposed or looked at for Highway 252 and I-94 that goes through Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and down into North Minneapolis. And the issues kind of related to what we're talking about today. How do we ensure that our voices, our interests are and that we are at the table, not on the table? I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you later on. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.